In this video, you will discover how people rebuild themselves after emotional collapse, mental exhaustion, disappointment, betrayal, failure, and years of feeling lost. You will understand why some people stay trapped in the same cycle while others transform themselves completely from the inside out. You will learn how to reset your mind, heal emotionally, regain control of your identity, and build a stronger version of yourself without pretending to be perfect. If you are trying to become mentally stronger, emotionally calmer, and more disciplined after difficult experiences, then this video is for you. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who needs this message, and write in the comments, "I am rebuilding myself." Sometimes, the strongest decision a person can make is not revenge, not proving themselves to others, and not running away from pain. Sometimes, the strongest decision is quietly rebuilding yourself while nobody notices. Most people think rebuilding your life starts with motivation, but that is not true. Real transformation usually starts with exhaustion. It starts after too many disappointments, too many sleepless nights, too many moments where you looked at yourself and realized you no longer recognize who you are. There comes a moment where your old mindset stops working. The habits that once distracted you no longer help. The people you depended on emotionally no longer bring peace. The version of yourself that survived yesterday cannot carry you into tomorrow. And this is where rebuilding begins. Not with excitement, but with honesty. Because rebuilding yourself mentally and emotionally requires destroying illusions first. You must stop lying to yourself about what is hurting you. You must stop pretending you are okay when your mind is constantly overwhelmed. You must stop surrounding yourself with people who drain your emotional energy while calling it loyalty. Many people want a new life without becoming a new person. They want peace while feeding chaos every day. They want confidence while constantly seeking approval. They want discipline while remaining addicted to comfort. But your future cannot be built with the same mentality that damaged your present. Sometimes your mind becomes a prison created by repetition, the same negative thoughts, the same emotional reactions, the same fears replaying every day until they feel like reality. And eventually, you stop questioning them. You begin to believe that anxiety is your personality, that emotional pain is permanent, that failure defines you. But thoughts repeated long enough are not always truth. Sometimes they are simply mental habits. Rebuilding yourself starts when you realize your mind has been programmed by experiences, environments, fears, and emotional wounds. And if the mind can be programmed negatively, it can also be rebuilt intentionally. This is why isolation often becomes part of transformation, not because you hate people, but because noise prevents self-awareness. Constant distractions stop you from hearing your own thoughts clearly. When you are always consuming entertainment, attention, drama, or validation, you lose connection with yourself. Silence becomes uncomfortable because it exposes everything you have been avoiding emotionally. But growth begins inside that silence. The uncomfortable truth is that emotional healing is not beautiful at first. It feels lonely. It feels confusing. Sometimes it feels like losing yourself before finding yourself again. There are days where you will question your progress because healing is not linear. Some mornings you feel strong. Other days, the same memories return and attack your peace again. But this does not mean you are failing. It means your mind is learning how to let go slowly. Most emotional damage is not caused by one dramatic moment. It is caused by repeated emotional neglect, repeated disappointment, repeated self-betrayal, repeated situations where you ignored your intuition just to keep someone else comfortable. Over time, this weakens your connection with yourself. You stop trusting your instincts, you stop respecting your emotional boundaries, and eventually, you abandon your own needs completely. This is why rebuilding yourself requires self-respect before self-confidence. Confidence without self-respect becomes performance. You pretend to be strong while emotionally collapsing in private. Real strength appears when your actions begin matching your values again, when you stop chasing people who do not value you, when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, when you stop sacrificing your mental peace to maintain temporary connections. Rebuilding yourself also means accepting responsibility for your future without blaming yourself for your past. Many people remain emotionally stuck because they confuse responsibility with shame. Yes, painful things happened. Yes, maybe people betrayed you, manipulated you, abandoned you, or underestimated you. But if you spend your entire life emotionally attached to what happened yesterday, you give your past permanent control over your future. Healing begins when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "Who do I need to become after this?" That question changes everything because pain either becomes your prison or your training ground. Emotionally strong people are not people who never suffered. They are people who stopped allowing suffering to define their identity. They learned how to sit with discomfort without escaping into addictions, distractions, toxic relationships, or endless validation seeking. One of the most powerful stages of rebuilding yourself is learning emotional discipline. Emotional discipline means not reacting to everything immediately. It means understanding that feelings are temporary, but decisions create consequences. Many lives are destroyed not by intelligence problems, but by emotional impulsiveness. People ruin relationships, opportunities, reputations, and their own peace because they cannot control temporary emotions. But emotional maturity changes this. You begin observing your emotions instead of obeying them automatically. You stop needing instant revenge. You stop needing everyone to understand you. You stop wasting energy trying to control people's opinions. And slowly, your inner world becomes calmer. This is where mental clarity returns, because clarity is impossible when your emotions control your decisions every day. Rebuilding your mind also requires changing what you consume daily. Your environment shapes your psychology more than motivation ever will. If your mind constantly absorbs negativity, comparison, fake perfection, fear, gossip, and emotional chaos, eventually your internal world reflects it. Protecting your mind is not weakness, it is psychological survival. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is disconnect long enough to hear your own thoughts again. Many people are mentally exhausted not because life is impossible, but because their attention is constantly fragmented. Your mind was not designed to process endless stimulation every minute. Rebuilding yourself requires mental space, space to think, space to reflect, space to breathe emotionally. And this is why discipline becomes more important than motivation. Motivation is emotional, discipline is identity. Motivation disappears when emotions change. Discipline continues even when feelings collapse. The person rebuilding themselves cannot depend on temporary emotional highs. They must create systems that continue even during difficult days. Small habits, repeated consistently, begin rebuilding identity slowly. Sleeping better, reading more, training your body, reducing emotional dependency, controlling your attention, protecting your peace, speaking to yourself with more awareness. These actions look small individually, but over time they completely reshape the mind. Eventually, something strange begins happening. The things that once controlled you emotionally begin losing power. Silence no longer scares you. Loneliness becomes peaceful instead of painful. Validation becomes less important. You stop needing to prove your worth constantly. And for the first time in a long time, you begin feeling emotionally stable from within instead of emotionally dependent on external circumstances. But rebuilding yourself also comes with sacrifice. Not everyone will understand your transformation. Some people benefited from your weakness. Some people liked the version of you that lacked boundaries, confidence, and emotional control. The moment you begin protecting your energy, they may call you cold, distant, selfish, or different. And maybe you are different now. Growth changes people. The mistake is thinking everyone deserves access to the new version of you just because they knew the old one. Sometimes rebuilding yourself means grieving relationships that no longer align with your future, and that pain is real. But temporary loneliness is less dangerous than permanent self-abandonment. The strongest people are not emotionally numb. They simply learned where not to invest their emotional energy anymore. They understand that protecting mental peace is not selfish, it is necessary. And eventually, after enough discipline, reflection, silence, healing, and painful honesty, you begin recognizing yourself again. Not the broken version shaped by survival, not the insecure version addicted to approval, but a calmer version, a clearer version, a stronger version built intentionally from the inside out. And the powerful part is that most people will never see the internal war you survived to become this person. They will only notice the confidence, the calmness, the discipline, and the emotional control. They will never fully understand how many nights you spent rebuilding your mind in silence, how many emotional battles you fought privately, how many times you almost gave up but continued anyway. That is the hidden reality of transformation. The strongest rebuilds often happen quietly, away from attention, away from applause, away from validation. And maybe that is why they become permanent, because this time you are not rebuilding yourself to impress the world. You are rebuilding yourself to finally feel at peace within your own mind. And once a person reaches that point emotionally, everything about their presence changes slowly. The way they speak changes, the way they think changes, the way they respond to disrespect changes, the way they protect their energy changes. Even their silence begins carrying strength instead of pain. Slowly, you stop chasing life desperately and start building it intentionally. You begin noticing that rebuilding yourself is less about becoming someone completely new and more about returning to the parts of yourself that were buried under fear, emotional exhaustion, disappointment, and survival mode. Many people spend years trying to escape themselves without realizing the real goal is not escape. The goal is reconstruction, because there is a difference between changing your appearance and changing your identity. A person can look successful externally while mentally collapsing internally every night. But when real internal rebuilding begins, your relationship with yourself changes completely. You stop seeing yourself as someone broken beyond repair. You begin understanding that even damaged minds can heal if they are given honesty, discipline, patience, and space to recover. One of the hardest stages of emotional rebuilding is facing the memories you tried to avoid for years. Most people do not realize how much emotional pain they carry until life becomes quiet. That is why many people fear silence. Silence removes distractions. It forces you to confront unresolved emotions, regrets, anger, guilt, abandonment, and disappointment. But avoiding pain does not destroy it. Avoidance only buries pain deeper into the subconscious, where it silently controls your behavior. Many reactions people call personality are actually unhealed emotional wounds. Some people become emotionally cold because they were betrayed too many times. Some become addicted to validation because they never felt truly seen. Some overthink constantly because their mind learned to expect danger even in peaceful situations. This is why rebuilding yourself mentally requires understanding the origin of your emotional patterns instead of just judging them. Self-awareness changes everything. The moment you understand why your mind reacts the way it does, you stop treating yourself like an enemy and start rebuilding yourself like someone worth saving. And this process takes time. Modern culture teaches people to expect instant transformation, instant confidence, instant healing, instant success. But real psychological growth is slow and often invisible at first. Sometimes your progress will not look dramatic externally. Nobody will applaud you because you controlled your emotions during a difficult conversation. Nobody will celebrate the nights you stayed disciplined instead of returning to destructive habits. Nobody will see the internal battles where you chose healing over self-destruction. But these invisible decisions are exactly what rebuild identity over time. Your future is shaped more by your private habits than your public image. And eventually, those quiet internal victories begin changing the way you carry yourself. You become less reactive, less desperate for attention, less emotionally dependent on people who constantly destabilize your peace. There is a calmness that develops inside people who survived emotional chaos and decided to rebuild instead of collapse. They stopped wasting energy proving themselves. They stopped competing unnecessarily. They stopped chasing validation from emotionally unavailable people, because rebuilding yourself teaches you something most people never learn. Peace is more valuable than attention. Many people destroy their mental health trying to maintain an image that impresses others while secretly exhausting themselves emotionally. But internal reconstruction forces honesty. You begin asking difficult questions. Who am I when nobody is watching? What habits are destroying my future quietly? What environments are poisoning my mind? Which relationships are feeding insecurity instead of growth? Which distractions are preventing me from hearing my real thoughts? Questions are uncomfortable because they force accountability, and accountability is painful because it removes excuses. But accountability is also freedom. The moment you accept responsibility for rebuilding your life, you stop waiting for someone else to save you emotionally. That does not mean you never need support. Humans need connection, but emotionally mature people understand that healing cannot be outsourced completely. Nobody can build your discipline for you. Nobody can regulate your emotions for you. Nobody can heal the parts of your mind you refuse to confront honestly. At some point, rebuilding becomes a personal responsibility. And one of the most important lessons during this journey is learning the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness feels empty because you feel disconnected from meaning. Solitude feels powerful because you reconnect with yourself intentionally. In the beginning, isolation may feel painful because your mind is addicted to external noise. But over time, you begin appreciating your own company again. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel alive. You learn how to sit alone without feeling abandoned. That emotional independence changes your entire psychology, because emotionally dependent people tolerate disrespect they should walk away from. They remain attached to unhealthy relationships because they fear being alone more than being emotionally damaged. But rebuilding yourself teaches you that temporary solitude is healthier than permanent emotional chaos. And slowly, your standards change. You no longer admire loudness. You no longer confuse attention with value. You stop being impressed by appearances alone. Instead, you begin valuing stability, discipline, calmness, honesty, emotional control, and self-respect. Your priorities evolve because pain forced you to mature psychologically. One of the strangest parts of rebuilding yourself is realizing that some people only understood the weak version of you. They knew the exhausted version, the emotionally available version that accepted bare minimum effort, the insecure version that tolerated manipulation. But when you begin changing internally, certain people become uncomfortable, not because you harmed them, but because your growth removes their access to controlling you emotionally. Boundaries reveal people's true intentions quickly. The moment you stop over-explaining yourself, over-giving, and over-sacrificing your peace, some relationships begin fading naturally. And although painful, this is necessary. Not every connection is meant to survive your transformation. Some people are attached to your old identity because it benefited them emotionally. Rebuilding yourself means accepting that growth sometimes creates distance, and that distance is not always loss. Sometimes it is protection. Mentally strong people understand that protecting peace is not weakness, it is wisdom developed through suffering. Eventually, you also realize that rebuilding yourself is not about becoming emotionless. Some people misunderstand healing and think emotional numbness equals strength. It does not. Emotional numbness is often unresolved pain disguised as control. True emotional strength means feeling emotions deeply without allowing them to control your identity or destroy your decisions. You still feel sadness, disappointment, anger, and fear, but you stop drowning inside them. You develop emotional awareness instead of emotional suppression. That awareness allows you to pause before reacting, to think before speaking, to observe situations without immediately collapsing mentally. This is what emotional maturity looks like in real life, and perhaps the most powerful transformation happens when you stop viewing yourself through the opinions of other people. For years, many people live according to external expectations. They become addicted to approval because they fear rejection. But rebuilding yourself requires separating your identity from public opinion. Not everyone will understand your journey. Some people only see your boundaries and call you arrogant. Some only see your silence and call you distant. Some only see your discipline and call you obsessed. But misunderstood growth is still growth. You cannot rebuild your life while constantly seeking permission from people who are emotionally committed to the old version of you. At some point, you must choose between temporary approval and long-term peace. And emotionally rebuilt people eventually choose peace. Because once you experience internal stability after years of emotional chaos, you stop romanticizing dysfunction. You stop confusing suffering with passion. You stop chasing intensity that destroys your nervous system. Calmness becomes attractive, stability becomes attractive. Mental clarity becomes attractive. Your entire perspective changes because you are no longer operating from emotional survival mode. And maybe that is the greatest sign that you are rebuilding yourself successfully. Not that life becomes perfect, not that pain disappears forever, but that you become stronger, calmer, wiser, and more emotionally aware than the person you used to be. Quietly, slowly, privately, you become someone your past self desperately needed. And the deeper you go into rebuilding yourself, the more you realize that healing is not only emotional, it is also neurological. Your brain adapts to whatever you repeat consistently. If you repeat fear long enough, your nervous system begins expecting danger everywhere. If you repeat self criticism long enough, your inner voice becomes hostile automatically. If you repeat emotional chaos long enough, peace starts feeling unfamiliar and even uncomfortable. This is why many people sabotage calm situations without realizing it. Their mind became addicted to emotional survival. They became so used to stress, anxiety, instability, and overthinking that healthy peace feels unnatural. Rebuilding yourself mentally means teaching your nervous system that safety still exists, and that process takes repetition. Not motivation for 2 days, not temporary excitement, repetition. The way you speak to yourself matters more than most people understand. Some people destroy themselves psychologically through internal dialogue alone. Every mistake becomes proof of failure. Every rejection becomes proof of worthlessness. Every delay becomes proof that life is against them. Over time, this creates mental exhaustion because the mind never truly rests. But rebuilding yourself requires changing that inner conversation. Not by lying to yourself with fake positivity, but by becoming more conscious of how your thoughts shape your emotional state. Mentally strong people are not people with perfect lives. They are people who learned how to guide their thoughts instead of becoming prisoners of them. And one of the biggest shifts happens when you stop seeing setbacks as proof that you should quit. Most people abandon themselves too early. They expect immediate results from emotional growth. But internal transformation works differently. Sometimes you are healing even when it feels like nothing is changing. Sometimes progress looks like surviving a difficult week without collapsing mentally. Sometimes progress is learning how to stay calm during situations that once destroyed your peace completely. Small internal victories matter more than dramatic external appearances, but modern culture rarely celebrates invisible growth. Society celebrates outcomes, not emotional endurance. People see confidence, but not the years of insecurity someone fought privately. They see discipline, but not the nights someone battled self destruction silently. They see emotional control, but not the pain that forced maturity. That is why rebuilding yourself can feel lonely at times, because many of your greatest battles happen where nobody can see them. But hidden growth is still growth, and often the strongest transformations happen privately because they are built on truth instead of performance. Eventually, you begin noticing that your relationship with discomfort changes. At first, discomfort feels threatening. You avoid difficult conversations, difficult habits, difficult truths, and difficult emotions because your mind wants immediate relief. But rebuilding yourself teaches you that temporary discomfort often creates long term freedom. Discipline is uncomfortable, boundaries are uncomfortable, honesty is uncomfortable, walking away from toxic environments is uncomfortable, facing your own patterns honestly is uncomfortable, but remaining mentally trapped is far more painful in the long run. Emotionally rebuilt people learn how to tolerate short term discomfort to protect long term peace, and that ability changes everything about their future. Because most destructive behaviors are simply attempts to escape discomfort temporarily. People overconsume distractions because silence feels uncomfortable. They stay in unhealthy relationships because loneliness feels uncomfortable. They avoid responsibility because failure feels uncomfortable. But the person rebuilding themselves learns an important truth. Discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes discomfort is growth happening in real time. This mindset slowly transforms your identity. You stop running from challenge automatically. You become more patient with yourself. You stop demanding perfection every day. You understand that rebuilding a damaged mind takes consistency, not self-hatred. Many people think harsh self-criticism creates discipline, but often it creates paralysis instead. A mind constantly attacked internally loses energy over time. Real discipline comes from respect for your future, not hatred for your present self. This is why emotional healing and discipline are deeply connected. A person who truly values themselves begins protecting their energy differently. They sleep differently, eat differently, think differently, choose relationships differently, spend time differently. Not because someone forced them to change, but because they no longer want to destroy themselves slowly. Rebuilding yourself also forces you to reevaluate what success actually means. Many people chase external achievements while emotionally collapsing internally. They achieve status, money, attention, or admiration, yet still feel empty because their inner world remains neglected. But after enough emotional pain, your definition of success evolves. Peace becomes success. Emotional stability becomes success. Mental clarity becomes success. Waking up without constant anxiety becomes success. Having boundaries becomes success. Feeling connected to yourself again becomes success. And strangely, once you stop obsessing over appearances, your presence becomes stronger naturally. Because authentic confidence is quieter than performance. Truly rebuilt people do not need to constantly announce their growth. Their energy changes, their decisions change, their standards change. Even their silence feels different. You can always recognize someone who rebuilt themselves through suffering. There is depth in the way they observe life. They become slower to judge others because pain humbled them. They become calmer during chaos because they survived internal storms already. They stop reacting emotionally to every opinion because they learned that not every voice deserves access to their peace. One of the most painful but necessary lessons during rebuilding is accepting that some chapters of your life must end completely. Some environments cannot support your growth. Some habits cannot follow you into your future. Some people only recognize the version of you that tolerated emotional disrespect. And letting go hurts because attachment does not disappear immediately. But rebuilding yourself requires understanding that attachment and alignment are not always the same thing. Just because you feel emotionally attached to someone or something does not mean it is healthy for your future. This realization is painful because humans naturally fear endings, but every transformation requires separation from something old. You cannot become mentally stronger while remaining emotionally attached to everything that weakens you. And eventually, after enough self-awareness, you stop chasing closure from people incapable of giving it honestly. You stop expecting apologies from emotionally immature people. You stop waiting for everyone to understand your pain. Instead, you focus your energy on rebuilding your life piece by piece, quietly, consistently, intentionally, and over time, something powerful begins happening. Your emotional resilience increases. Situations that once shattered your confidence no longer control you completely. You recover faster from disappointment. You trust yourself more. You stop panicking every time life becomes uncertain. Because rebuilding yourself teaches you that strength is not the absence of difficulty. Strength is the ability to remain mentally grounded while facing difficulty. And perhaps the most beautiful part of rebuilding yourself is realizing that your past no longer has absolute authority over your future. The pain shaped you, yes. The failures affected you, yes. The betrayals changed you, yes. But they do not own you forever unless you continue surrendering your identity to them. There comes a moment where you finally understand that rebuilding yourself is an act of quiet rebellion against everything that tried to break you mentally and emotionally. Every healthy habit becomes resistance. Every boundary becomes resistance. Every moment of self-respect becomes resistance. Every calm response instead of emotional chaos becomes proof that you are no longer controlled by your wounds alone. And little by little, day by day, decision by decision, you begin creating a version of yourself that is no longer built from survival, fear, and emotional exhaustion, but from awareness, discipline, peace, and inner strength. And maybe this is the moment where you finally understand something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Rebuilding yourself is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious, conscious of your habits, conscious of your emotional patterns, conscious of the environments that weaken you and the disciplines that strengthen you. Because the moment you become aware of what destroys your peace internally, you can no longer pretend you do not see it. And awareness changes a person permanently. The old version of you reacted automatically to everything. Every disappointment felt like the end. Every rejection felt personal. Every emotional wound controlled your identity. But the rebuilt version of you begins moving differently, slower, calmer, more intentional. You stop giving immediate reactions to temporary emotions. You stop abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. You stop chasing people who repeatedly prove they do not value your presence. And most importantly, you stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be saved. Because rebuilding yourself teaches self-reliance emotionally. It teaches you that your peace cannot depend entirely on external circumstances. Life will always contain uncertainty. People will still disappoint you sometimes. Plans will still fail. Unexpected pain will still appear. But mentally strong people learn how to remain grounded even when life becomes unstable. That is the difference. They do not panic every time difficulty appears because they built inner stability slowly over time. And perhaps the most powerful part of this journey is realizing that your greatest transformation will not always be visible immediately. Some people expect healing to look dramatic, but often healing looks ordinary from the outside. It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like sleeping peacefully after years of anxiety. It looks like walking away from chaos instead of participating in it. It looks like no longer needing to explain your worth constantly. It looks like protecting your mind instead of sacrificing it for temporary approval. These quiet changes may seem small, but together they rebuild an entirely new identity, a calmer identity, a wiser identity, a stronger identity, and eventually you begin attracting different experiences because your standards changed internally first. You stop accepting emotional confusion as love. You stop accepting disrespect as normal. You stop settling for environments that constantly damage your mental health. The rebuilt version of you understands that protecting peace is part of self-respect, and once someone truly learns that lesson emotionally, they become difficult to manipulate, because manipulation depends on emotional weakness, insecurity, guilt, fear, and desperation. But rebuilding yourself slowly removes those vulnerabilities. You become emotionally aware enough to recognize unhealthy patterns early. You become disciplined enough to choose long-term peace over short-term emotional satisfaction. And you become mentally resilient enough to continue moving forward even after painful experiences. At some point, you stop asking life to become easier and start becoming stronger internally instead. That shift changes everything, because when the mind becomes stronger, chaos loses some of its power over you. Fear loses some of its control over you. Even your past loses some of its emotional weight, and one day, maybe without realizing it immediately, you wake up and notice something different. The things that once emotionally destroyed you no longer control your entire day. The silence that once felt lonely now feels peaceful. The validation you once desperately chased no longer feels necessary. You begin enjoying your own company again. You trust yourself again. You feel emotionally connected to yourself again. And this is how real transformation happens, quietly, slowly, through small decisions repeated consistently, not through one motivational moment, but through daily acts of self-respect, through discipline during difficult days, through honesty during painful moments, through patience when healing feels invisible. And if you are currently rebuilding yourself mentally and emotionally, remember this carefully. You are not weak because you struggled. You are not behind because your healing takes time. Some of the strongest people alive are simply people who refuse to give up on themselves after life tried to break them repeatedly. Every day you continue rebuilding yourself consciously is proof that your future still matters to you. Even if nobody sees your internal battles, they matter. Even if nobody applauds your progress, it matters. Because one day, the version of you that currently feels exhausted, confused, emotionally overwhelmed, or mentally drained will look back and realize that this painful season was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of your reconstruction. And perhaps that is the real meaning of strength, not becoming emotionless, not pretending pain never existed, but becoming someone who can carry pain without allowing it to destroy their identity anymore. If this video spoke to you, subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with someone who may need this message, activate the notification bell so you never miss upcoming videos, and write in the comments, "I am rebuilding myself." Sometimes a single decision to keep going quietly changes an entire future.